When Maria Felix's passionate affair with cabaret owner Freddie came to an end, the star got a revenge so vicious and intimate, it was unforgettable. Her reign was supreme, and she captured the imagination of people the world over. They knew her by La Doña. They knew her by Maria Bonita. Her real name was Maria Felix, and she was one of the most successful and beautiful actresses in Latin America. She shunned Hollywood's seductions and remained true to her roots, but her script was a drama including tragic loss, kidnappings, bitter rivalries, and murder. Maria Felix was born on April 8, 1914 in Mexico. Even by the day's standards, she had an enormous family with an incredible 15 siblings. Of the brood, Felix was closest to her brother, Pablo. Pablo and Maria were excessively close growing up, and even their own mother didn't think their bond was healthy or moral. To her horror, the Felix matriarch eventually began to suspect that her sweet children were in an incestuous relationship. Faced with the scandal, the family took immediate action. In 1929, Maria's parents broke her heart when they decided to send her brother and best friend, Pablo, away to military college as a thinly veiled way to split them up. The move was traumatic for the young Maria. Around this time, Maria Felix's beauty became undeniable. Although she was a tomboy who loved riding horses more than wearing dresses, she nonetheless won a beauty queen title at the University of Guadalajara when she was still a teenager. Felix was riding high, and all eyes were on the young girl. Yet, this also attracted the wrong kind of attention. Furious with the parents who sent her beloved brother away, Felix began looking for a way out. So when she met Max Factor cosmetic salesman Enrique Alvarez at just 17 years old, she plunged right into the romance and married him in 1931. Before long, she would deeply regret the rash decision. Married life was anything but blissful for Felix. Almost as soon as he married her, Alvarez turned into an entirely different man. Jealous to his core, he demanded that she confine herself to their home and go almost nowhere else. Otherwise, he feared random men would ogle her on the street. When the newlyweds did leave the house, one of Alvarez's only pre-approved activities was going to the movies together. Even then, he would hide his beautiful wife from other men. He'd enter the theatre in the middle of the film, when everything was already dark, and leave the cinema before the movie had ended. In 1935, at barely 20 years old, Felix gave birth to a child she named Enrique. The boy was a bright light in her otherwise dull life. Unsurprisingly, Felix was absolutely miserable in her wreck of a marriage, and it all unravelled in an act of betrayal. At her wit's end, the forlorn and desperate Felix ended up having an affair with her neighbour. Her marital sin filled her with guilt, until that is, she found out her husband had done even worse. It's no wonder that Alvarez was a jealous man. He'd been two-timing poor Maria almost the entire length of their marriage. Since Felix spent a lot of time indoors during her ill-fated union, she frittered away the hours while listening to the radio. One of her favourite shows was The Intimate Hour, hosted by songwriter Agustin Lara. As she listened one day, she told her sisters she was going to marry Agustin Lara. In 1937, Maria Felix finally broke free of her marital chains and divorced Alvarez, taking her son and moving back to her family. It was going to be her great escape, but it didn't turn out that way. After her Catholic town gossiped incessantly about her divorced status, she packed up and ran to Mexico City. There, Felix got a scandalous job. On the surface, she was just working as a receptionist at a plastic surgeon's clinic, yet in actuality the surgeon was using her as a model to attract clients to his practice. Felix's insanely jealous ex-husband couldn't stand the fact that she had taken sole custody of their son, and he hatched a diabolical plan. Alvarez kidnapped the young boy and took him back to Guadalajara to live with his grandmother. At the time, Felix was powerless and heartbroken, but she swore she would get her son back. In 1940, Felix was waiting in line to use a public payphone when she met her destiny. As she was standing there, she ran into none other than Agustin Lara, the host of The Intimate Hour, and the same man she predicted she would marry. They had just a brief conversation before he walked off, but it would eventually change her life. And this wasn't her only fateful encounter. In 1941, filmmaker and director Fernando Palacios spotted Felix simply strolling down the street, then walked over and told her she could be a movie star. Over the next few months, Felix became Palacios' pet project. By night, he introduced her to the industry movers and shakers, while by day she took lessons in diction, acting and dance, and participated in photo shoots and public appearances. Then came her first film, only it was an utter disaster. Felix was excited for her first starring role in El Peñón de las Ánimas, yet it produced a huge rivalry. Though she starred opposite the popular actor Jorge Negrete in the film, her leading man was far from friendly. He had campaigned to get his own girlfriend as the romantic lead, and he was none too happy that Felix had stolen her role, and he let her know it. Every day on set of the film was a nightmare for Felix, with constant humiliations and spats with Negrete. In one particularly bad blowout, the pair had a direct confrontation that gave Maria Felix a reputation around the crew for being a hard-as-nails diva. But for all her problems on set, Felix had bigger issues behind the scenes. On December 26, 1937, her beloved brother Pablo died in Mexico City, reportedly taking his own life. Felix, however, staunchly refused to believe that and claimed for the rest of her life that he was actually the victim of a murder. Felix's devoutly Catholic parents had a hard enough time with her divorce, and her newfound stardom was too much for them to take. They demanded that Felix give up acting, but the stubborn woman had enough of giving in to other people's desires. When she refused, her father disowned her entirely. Felix's star was now on the rise, but she had a big stumbling block to go. Her next film, Maria Eugenia, caused an utter scandal in the cinema world when it showed her in a risque swimsuit. She quickly wished everyone would forget about it, and when she starred in her next film, they did. In the early 1940s, Mexican writer Romulo Gallegos was adapting his best-selling revenge novel, Doña Barbara, into a film, and when he met Maria Felix, he knew he had found his leading lady. When Felix starred in Doña Barbara, an icon was born. The titular Doña was a vengeful daughter bent on retribution for the murder of her family, and the film traded on Felix's burgeoning bad girl image in a big way. The movie was an instant hit, and it quickly defined Felix both professionally and personally, with people calling her simply La Doña for the rest of her life. At the height of her fame, the starlet got a very indecent proposal. Overcome with lust, the king of Egypt, King Farouk, reportedly offered Maria Felix Nefertiti's crown, one of his most treasured possessions, if she would spend just a single night with him. If you want to know more about that old dog, there's a link to that video in the description below. In the aftermath of her blockbuster hit, men were falling over themselves for Felix. Still, she had only one big fish in mind for herself: her old crush, Agustin Lara. They got together as a Mexican power couple, and the songwriter dazzled the actress with gifts of furs, jewels, and a nearly endless string of iconic songs during their famous courtship. To the horror of her upright family, Felix relished in her femme fatale image, like the diva she was, once happily describing herself as the #1 enemy of Mexican family morals. And now that she was finally a powerful legend, there was the score she had to settle with her ex. Throughout all her years clawing her way up to fame, Felix never once forgot about her son, Enrique, and she knew exactly when and how to strike. With the help of her influential and persuasive beau, Lara, Felix went back to Guadalajara, tricked the boy's grandmother, and kidnapped him right back after years apart. On Christmas Eve 1945, Felix married Lara in a private ceremony in her home. For a time, it seemed like a dream come true, with Lara even penning his most famous song, Maria Bonita, on their honeymoon. The melody became synonymous with Felix's beauty and catapulted her into immortality. Her marriage, however, was short-lived. Like her first husband, Lara had a raging jealousy problem, made all the worse by the fact that the beautiful Felix was one of the hottest box office draws in Mexico. They divorced in 1947 after just 2 years of marriage, and Lara did not react well. In 1948, bitter about Felix's celebrity and success away from him, Felix claims that Lara tried to shoot her in a fit of rage. He missed and avoided a run-in with the law, but it was the irrevocable end of their relationship. Unfortunately, Felix never got much better at picking men. It seemed like the moment Maria Felix got her life back together, fate always threw her another curveball. 1951 was no different. That year, while filming a movie in Italy, Felix learned that her estranged father had just suffered a fatal heart attack. The news and the realization that they could now never reconcile shattered the actress. Felix apparently had a thing for love-hate dynamics, because her next man was an old enemy. In 1953, she reconnected with Jorge Negrete, her first leading man and sworn rival. She said that when he surrendered at her feet, she found it in her heart to forgive him. The couple married just a few months after they began their whirlwind fling, and Felix's fame had reached such an apex, she broadcast her wedding live throughout Latin America in what tabloids called the wedding of the century. In the end, a bitter divorce didn't ruin Felix and Negrete, death did. By the time the pair married, Negrete had already been ill for quite some time, and had been battling cirrhosis of the liver for decades. Just 11 months after their nuptials, while on a trip to Los Angeles, Negrete succumbed to the illness at just 42 years old. Throughout Felix's storied career, there was one dark whisper that dogged her. A persistent rumour claimed she had a secret marriage to Raúl Prado, a member of the hit Mexican music group Trio Calaveras, in between her first marriage to Alvarez and her second to Lara. Felix denied it all her life, but then again, she had reason to. If the clandestine nuptials did take place, they were brief and embarrassing. According to multiple people from Felix's inner circle, Prado and the starlet wed in 1943 and then quickly split, just 2 months later. The reason? Felix's next husband, Agustin Lara, sent her a piano as a gift, and as one source put it, Raúl threw her out with the piano. Felix could never be single for long, but for her fourth husband, she seemed to finally get something right. In 1956, she ignited a flame with her longtime friend, the banker Alexandre Berger. Astonishingly, the pair stayed together for 18 years. Felix tried to become pregnant again to give Enrique a sibling, but it ended in horror. One day while she was filming a movie, she had an accident on set and miscarried. Both Felix and Berger were heartbroken, and she never had any more children. Maria Felix's life was dotted with periods of great triumph and then pocked with valleys of immense tragedy. In 1974, her husband Berger passed from lung cancer just months after her own mother died. The two losses, back to back, flung Felix into a deep depression. Felix was one of the biggest stars of her day, and her influence was almost mind-boggling. Her star power was so enormous in the Latin world in particular, that on one of her visits to Cuba, she asked the president to pardon a man who was set to face execution. Surprising everyone but herself, he granted her wish. Maria Felix's desperate plot to get famous and get her son back has become part of her origin myth. However, the truth may be much darker. According to one version of events, right after her divorce, she walked into a room and discovered her son Enrique wearing a dress and jewellery. Felix was so angry, she beat the boy unconscious, and his father only reclaimed custody to save him. Whatever the truth about Felix and her son, their relationship still came to a sad end. In 1996, Enrique suffered a fatal heart attack, just like his grandfather, and passed at the still young age of 62. The sudden and surprising loss shook Felix to the core, and she never truly recovered from his death. At the beginning of her career, many thought Felix had what it took to become a star in the United States, and her agents took her to Hollywood to meet its most famous luminaries, including filmmaker Cecil B. DeMille and actress Greta Garbo. She refused, preferring to stay in Mexico to launch her career. In the end, La Doña went out like a true star of the silver screen. In 2002, when she was 88 years old, she died in her sleep. Even better, she did it on April 8th, her birthday. Her body is now in her family's tomb in Mexico City with her son Enrique and her parents. However, even in the afterlife, Maria Felix made scandalous headlines. She had amassed a fortune over her career, so her enormous surviving family were furious when they discovered that the heir to the Felix estate wasn't them. Instead, she left everything to her driver and personal assistant, Luis Martinez de Anda. The family didn't take the slight lying down. In fact, they started screaming bloody murder. Furious and in disbelief, Felix's brother Benjamin went off the deep end and accused de Anda of slaying his sister to get at her money. Eventually, a court had to exhume Felix's remains to prove once and for all that she died from natural causes. For all her fame and infamy, there's one thing about Maria Felix that many of her fans don't know: she was bisexual. During the 50s, Felix met notorious Parisian cabaret owner Freddie, who had already enjoyed high-profile relationships with the likes of Marlene Dietrich. The women fell into a passionate affair, and its end was even more fiery than its beginning. Freddie and Felix were on again and off again for almost half a decade, but after a brief reconciliation in 1954, they had a violent and permanent falling out. Felix was so vengeful over the split, she took Freddie all the way to court for the pettiest of reasons, claiming that her ex had taken her jewellery and demanding it back. While the couple were together, the artist Leonor Fini painted a portrait of them as a pair of flowers. During their breakup, Felix retained custody of the piece and recommissioned Fini to paint over Freddie's face with her own, so that it was just two Marias. Drama and narcissism in one go. She wouldn't have had it any other way. If you enjoyed this video, please give it a like and subscribe for more videos.